Welcome to today's deep dive. It is Tuesday, February 24, 2026. And if you have glanced at a calendar this morning, you know that this date carries a massive amount of weight.
It really does. It marks exactly 4 years since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began.
Right. And usually when we hit these anniversaries, the 1 year, the 2 year mark, the media coverage tends to be very retrospective. It's somber. It's about memorials, resilience.
Exactly. Lots of speeches.
Lots of speeches. But while we are certainly seeing that today, there is a very different energy coming out of the Western capitals right now.
There is. And that is what we are here to unpack.
Yeah, I was reading through this stack of reports you sent over, specifically the breakdown from Culti via Patreon, and it doesn't feel like a memorial service at all. It feels like a mobilization.
That is the perfect word for it.
We aren't looking at symbolic gestures today. What the Culti report details is a massive, coordinated economic and military maneuver by Western allies. Specifically, a really dense, aggressive set of moves from Australia and Canada.
And framing it as a mobilization is key because while the cameras are on the speeches today, the actual machinery of government is executing a strategy that has clearly been in the works for months.
Right. This isn't just someone waking up and saying, let's do more sanctions.
No, not at all. We are 4 years in. You can't really ban Russian vodka or diamonds a second time. What the source material shows us today is a shift in the quality of the economic warfare.
It feels like we have moved from the shotgun approach of 2022 to a sniper approach in 2026.
Very much so.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how this economic battlefront is shifting, because the details here are fascinating. We have sweeping new sanctions, billions in aid, but then we have these incredibly specific technical adjustments, things targeting ghost fleets, AI, cryptocurrency.
And that specificity is exactly the point. The low-hanging fruit is completely gone. Now, the Allies are looking at the specific ways Russia has been evading the blockade for the last 4 years, and they are trying to plug those leaks with surgical precision.
So let's start with the biggest leak, both literally and figuratively, which is the oil.
The lifeblood of the war economy.
Right. The report leads with a massive crackdown on the so-called ghost fleet. Now, ghost fleet sounds like something out of a pirate movie, but I have a feeling the reality is a lot less cinematic and a lot more grimy.
Oh, it is incredibly grimy. When we talk about the ghost fleet, or the shadow fleet as it's sometimes called, we aren't talking about invisible ships. We are talking about a flotilla of aging, decrepit tankers.
Like, how old are we talking?
These are vessels that are often 20 to 25 years old. Ships that are well past their prime.
Ships that legitimate companies usually scrap because they are dangerous.
Precisely. No reputable Western insurer, like the big firms in London, will touch these ships because they're floating environmental disasters waiting to happen.
But the report indicates Russia have been buying them up.
Yes. Over the last few years, they have quietly purchased hundreds of these vessels to create a parallel logistics network. The goal is simple: move oil without relying on Western ships or Western insurance, so they don't have to follow Western rules.
And the main rule they are trying to dodge is the price cap, right?
That's the one. The G7 essentially said, you can't sell oil using our maritime services unless you sell it cheap. So Russia decided to use their own rusty ships and insure them themselves.
But looking at the numbers from Canada today, it seems like the West has decided to stop ignoring these rust buckets. The Patreon report notes that Canada alone has now sanctioned over 500 of these vessels in total.
Which is a staggering number.
And 100 of those are new ones added just in this anniversary package.
500 ships is a massive chunk of the global maritime infrastructure to blacklist. And we should probably explain what sanctioning a ship actually means in practice. Because the Canadian Navy isn't going out there and sinking them.
Right. They aren't engaging in piracy. It's a bureaucratic sinking.
It is. When you sanction a specific hull, the ship itself, it becomes radioactive. It obviously can't enter ports in Canada or Australia.
Which they probably weren't doing anyway.
Right. But more importantly, it becomes toxic to service providers globally. If that ship's engine breaks down in a neutral port, or if it needs refueling, any local company that does business with the West won't touch it. They don't want to risk secondary sanctions.
So it forces these ships into longer, weirder routes. They have to find friendly ports, which might be thousands of miles out of the way.
Exactly, which burns more fuel, takes more time, and raises the overhead cost of every single barrel of oil they transport. It turns a profitable trade route into a logistical nightmare.
And Australia is joining this specific crackdown too, right?
Yes, it is a highly coordinated signal. They are basically saying, we have the satellite data, we know the names of your ships, and we are hunting them down on the ledger one by one.
Speaking of the ledger, I want to drill into the financial fine print here, because there is a number in the joint statement from Australia and Canada that made me stop and reread it. It's the new price cap on Russian oil.
Ah, yes, the $44.10 figure.
Yes, 44.10.
Yeah.
It was previously 47.60. Now, usually when governments do things, they use round numbers. $50, $45. Why on earth are they squabbling over 10 cents? Why 44.10?
This is where it gets really interesting for anyone following the economic strategy. It gives us a glimpse into the algorithm of the sanctions. That number isn't random.
It's not just pulled out of a hat.
No, that 44.10 figure is almost certainly calculated based on a very specific formula involving the break-even cost of Russian oil extraction.
So they're trying to find the absolute floor.
They are looking for the exact pain point. See, the West is walking a tightrope here. If you set the cap too low, say, $20, Russia might just decide it is not worth pumping oil at all.
And then they turn off the taps. Global supply crashes. Gas prices in Montreal and Sydney skyrocket, and voters get angry.
Exactly. But if you set it too high, Russia makes a healthy profit and uses that profit to buy missiles.
So 44.10 represents a calculated break-even plus pennies number.
Correct. The Allies are essentially saying, we think we can squeeze another $3.50 of profit out of your pocket without forcing you to shut down the wells entirely.
And $3.50 a barrel doesn't sound like much until you realize they are exporting millions of barrels. That is billions of dollars a year stripped from the war chest.
It is economic strangulation, not a sudden heart attack. And the fact that Australia and Canada aligned on this down to the dime shows that the technical bureaucracy behind the scenes is incredibly synchronized. They are definitely sharing their math.
So that is the wet front of the war, the oil and the ships. But moving on in the report, Australia came out swinging on a completely different front today. The Coltep breakdown calls this Australia's biggest sanctions package since February 2022.
Which is a very significant claim. February 2022 was the shock and awe phase. For Australia to wait 4 years and then drop a hammer this big tells you they have been saving up for a major push.
And the names attached to this are the heavy hitters. You have Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Defense Minister Richard Marles, Foreign Minister Penny Wong. This is a whole-of-government move.
It is a united front.
But the thing that caught my eye in their target list wasn't the banks or the transport companies. It was one word: cryptocurrency.
Yes, this is a major first for Canberra in this specific context.
I feel like sanctioning crypto is a buzzword we hear a lot, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second. How does that work in reality? If I am a sanctioned oligarch, isn't the whole point of Bitcoin that the Australian government can't touch it? It's decentralized?
Technically, you are completely right. They can't stop the blockchain itself. They can't ban the underlying math.
Yeah.
But they can target the on-ramps and the off-ramps. And that is what the source material says Australia is doing here.
The exchanges. The people who turn the Bitcoin back into rubles or dollars.
Exactly. You can have $1 billion in Bitcoin, but if you can't convert it into fiat currency to pay your soldiers or buy parts for your tanks, it is just numbers on a screen. Australia is targeting the exchanges and facilitators that have been acting as the bridge between the crypto world and the real economy.
So if an exchange is on the Australian blacklist, no allied bank will touch them.
And their assets in allied jurisdictions get frozen. The report explicitly states these entities were facilitating cross-border payments to circumvent sanctions.
Basically plugging the digital loophole.
Right. For a long time, crypto was seen as the Wild West where you could hide assets. Australia is effectively putting out a statement saying, we can see the blockchain too, and we know who you are.
It really highlights how modern warfare has mutated. You have trench warfare in the Donbass, which looks like 1914, and simultaneously you have forensic accountants hunting down crypto wallets in Sydney, which is very 2026.
It is the textbook definition of a hybrid war. And looking at the rest of Australia's list, it covers aerospace, transport, science, technology. The report notes they're targeting 180 individuals and entities.
And when you add up the Australian contribution over the last 4 years, The numbers are substantial.
Hmm.
The breakdown notes 1,800 total sanctions and over $1.7 billion in assistance.
With 1.5 billion of that being direct military support, that is a lot of hardware from a country that is literally on the other side of the planet.
Which is a great segue, actually, because while Australia is hacking away at the digital finance networks, the software side of War Canada seems to be bringing the heavy metal.
Literally heavy metal.
Let's talk about this package from Prime Minister Mark Carney. We have a commitment of roughly 2 billion Canadian dollars in military assistance for the next fiscal year. But it is a specific year listed in the Patreon release that jumped out at me. We aren't just sending blankets and ammo. We are sending armored vehicles, a lot of them.
More than 400. That is a brigade-level deployment of armor.
400 vehicles. The breakdown is interesting. 66 LAV-6 vehicles and 383 senators. Now, for the listener who thinks a tank is a tank, these are two very different animals, aren't they?
They are completely different tools designed for completely different jobs. The LAV-6, the light armored vehicle, that is your fighter, it is made by General Dynamics. It has a 25mm cannon, it has heavy armor, it has advanced optics.
So it's built for combat?
It is designed to engage the enemy directly. It can take a hit and keep fighting. It is a brawler on the front lines.
Okay, so that is the tip of the spear. What about the Senator?
The Senator, which is made by Rochelle, is a different beast entirely. It is an APC, an armored personnel carrier. Think of it as a terrifyingly tough taxi for troops.
A tough taxi, I like that.
It is built on a heavy-duty commercial chassis. It is blast-resistant, but its main job isn't to fight tanks. Its job is to get soldiers from point A to point B without them getting killed by shrapnel, landmines, or small arms fire.
So sending 383 senators versus 66 LAVs, that ratio tells a story about what the actual needs are on the ground right now.
It tells us they are prioritizing mobility and survivability. In a war that has become very static and incredibly artillery-heavy, moving troops safely is the hardest part.
You probably lose more soldiers in transit driving a soft truck to the front line than you do in the actual assault sometimes.
Exactly. Mechanizing that movement with nearly 400 vehicles is a massive, massive upgrade for their logistics and survival rates.
It is effectively mechanizing several battalions at once. But I have to ask about the logistics of the donation itself. Shipping 400 armored vehicles across the Atlantic, that is not like mailing a letter.
Oh, it is a logistical nightmare. It requires massive roll-off ships, secure convoys, rail transport across Europe. It is a feat just to get them to the border, but it sends a huge physical message.
Now, I have to play the skeptic, or at least the auditor, for a second, because the sources are very clear on the funding nuance. The headline number is 2 billion Canadian dollars. But the report mentions a detail from Reuters that clarifies this. It says 300 million is new money, and the rest was budgeted back in November.
Ah, yes. The classic announce and re-announce strategy of government budgeting.
Right. It feels a bit like finding $20 in your winter coat and acting like you just won the lottery. Is this just political theater?
It is easy to be cynical about it, and the report certainly points out the discrepancy. But to be fair to the process under Prime Minister Carney, this is actually how sustainable military procurement works.
You shouldn't be buying tanks on a whim.
Exactly. You should be budgeting these things months in advance. You don't want to run a multi-year war effort on impulse buys. The $300 million is the fresh injection to cover immediate needs, but the $1.7 billion was the long-term plan finally being executed.
That makes sense. And Carney's quote in the report reinforces that idea of a long-term plan. He said, and I am quoting here, Russia is failing. The sooner they engage in peace talks, the better for everyone involved.
That is a very confident stance 4 years in.
It is. The report frames this as a sign of deep institutional commitment. It is not reactionary anymore. It is baked into the budget.
And that is the exact signal Moscow hates to see. They rely on the idea of Ukraine fatigue. They want the West to get bored or distracted. When they see multi-year budget lines for LAV-6s, they realize the supply chain isn't drying up anytime soon.
But Canada isn't just betting on heavy armor either. They are also looking at the future of warfare, similar to what Australia is doing.
Right, the technology side.
The report mentions Canada targeting Russia's artificial intelligence ecosystem.
This is a crucial detail. We talked about Australia hitting crypto. Canada is explicitly sanctioning individuals involved in AI, drone production, and hybrid warfare capabilities.
The AI ecosystem. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel. What does that mean in practice? Are they sanctioning computer code?
They are sanctioning the brains behind the code. They are targeting the researchers, the labs, the The drone startups, the dual-use technology firms.
Because everything is drones now.
Exactly. We have seen how this war has evolved into a massive drone war. It is about algorithms now. Who has the better targeting software? Who has the better electronic jamming?
So by attacking the ecosystem, Canada is trying to cause a brain drain.
That is the strategy the report points to. If you are a brilliant Russian AI researcher and you suddenly find yourself sanctioned by Canada and likely its allies, your career is essentially dead globally.
You can't publish in Western journals, you can't travel to conferences, you can't collaborate.
Right. It incentivizes the smartest people to leave the country, or at the very least stops them from helping the military-industrial complex.
It is aiming to decapitate their innovation.
Because the allies know that if autonomous drone swarms become the norm, the dynamics of the war change instantly. This is a race for the technological edge.
So when you step back and look at the whole board based on these sources, we have Australia plugging the financial leaks in crypto, we have Canada attacking the technological future in AI, and both of them squeezing the oil trade with this specific price cap. It feels like a pincer movement on the economy, combined with the heavy armor on the ground.
It is a total war approach, kinetic, financial, and technological. They are trying to squeeze the capacity to wage war from every possible angle.
There was one other element here in the report, smaller in dollar value, but maybe massive in impact for the people actually living through this, the human and infrastructure element.
Yes, Foreign Minister Anita Anand announced a separate $20 million specifically for Ukraine's Energy Support Fund.
Which, compared to billions for tanks, sounds like a rounding error. But I imagine if you are on the ground, that money is huge.
It is absolutely critical. That money goes to repairing the transformers and the grid infrastructure that gets targeted constantly. It is about keeping the lights on, keeping the heat running.
You can't fight a war or survive a winter if your grid is down.
Exactly. It reminds us that there is a civilian infrastructure war happening entirely parallel to the military one.
And when you zoom out and look at Canada's total contribution over the last 4 years, the number is mind-boggling. According to the Cold release, Canada has pledged more than $25.5 billion in total aid since February 2022.
With $8.5 billion of that being strictly military, that makes Canada one of the most significant backers in the alliance on a per capita basis.
And speaking of alliances, the report mentions something called the Coalition of Wills.
Yes, the Coalition of Wills.
It says the leaders of this coalition met virtually today. And the definition here is really interesting. The text defines them as nations that have pledged security guarantees to Ukraine following a ceasefire.
This is arguably the most forward-looking part of the entire document.
Because everyone else is focused on winning the war today. But this group is focused on what happens the day after the war ends.
And security guarantees is basically diplomatic code for we will not let this happen a third time.
It is the bridge to a permanent peace.
It implies that there will be a structure, maybe not full NATO membership immediately, but something very close to it. Essentially an ironclad insurance policy that locks them into the Western security architecture.
It is telling that they chose to meet on the anniversary. It sends a message that even if the shooting stops today, the geopolitical shift is already permanent.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the synthesis of all this. We are 4 years in. We are seeing billions in tanks, hundreds of sanctioned ships, AI blockades, crypto bans, and now this coalition of wills. It feels like the lines are being drawn in permanent ink.
They really are, and that is the sobering realization of this anniversary report. Back in 2022, a lot of people thought maybe sanctions were a temporary slap on the wrist. Stop the war, and we will turn SWIFT back on.
Right. It was treated as a temporary punishment to force behavior change.
But now, you don't build a sanctions regime against an entire AI ecosystem or reroute global shipping lanes for a temporary spat. You don't build a logistics chain for 400 armored vehicles for a conflict you expect to end next week. These are structural, long-term changes to the global economy.
We are building a wall, not a fence.
Exactly. And that raises the question I have been asking myself reading this report. We always talk about globalization as this inevitable force that brings everyone together. But with Australia sanctioning crypto networks and Canada sanctioning code and AI, are we witnessing the permanent bifurcation of the world?
A Western bloc and a shadow bloc.
A shadow bloc, one that runs on ghost fleets, uses unsanctioned crypto exchanges, and develops its own walled garden AI. Can the global economy ever actually integrate again after this? Or are we destined for two separate internets, two separate banking systems, and two separate realities?
That is a massive thought. It is not just about who wins territory on the ground anymore. It is about whether the world stays round or splits in two.
And once you split the tech stack, the AI and the crypto, it is very, very hard to merge it back together. The code creates its own reality.
Well, on that cheerful note, seriously though,
Yeah.
thank you for helping us navigate the fine print of this report. It turns out $44.10 isn't just a number, it's a highly calibrated weapon.
It certainly is.
And to you, our listener, thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. As you go about your day, think about that coalition of wills. What does a security guarantee actually look like in a world where the threats are digital as well as physical? We will keep an eye on the ghost fleet, and we will catch you in the next one.